Welcome to another episode of Code Breakers, the podcast that empowers you to overcome life's challenges and tap into your full potential. I'm Sam, your host. I've realized in the last several years, I'm far more interested in talking about things that other people would prefer to sweep under the rug or simply pretend doesn't exist. So today, we're going to dive into the impacts leaders knowingly or unknowingly have on the general progression or stagnation or even regression of society, and the influence leaders exhibit over people who either choose to follow them or are simply in their impact radius, immediate, secondary, or tertiary, which is also why I think leaders of all kinds should be able to think systemically. It's also why I'm passionate about leaders understanding trauma, its impact on mental capacity and overall performance, and how repetitive collective trauma affects people, and particularly historically excluded or marginalized people. I spend a lot of time educating myself so that if and when I find myself being the only socially conscious person in the room, I'm prepared to speak up and out against microaggressions and other small acts of exclusion that reinforce the belief that some are better or know better or belong more than others. I've spent the majority of the last several years on my own healing journey, my own learning and unlearning journey, and I have plenty of room for growth, like don't we all? So why not be conscious of this? Why not include this as an area of opportunity? And by the way, if you're interested in activism and anti-racist perspectives and learning, go follow these accounts. All this to say, I think that all of us are interconnected. So of course, it's not far off for me to also believe that my own healing journey from my own trauma and my own lived experiences, I do feel that it's all intertwined to some degree. So the reason I bring it up here and now is because I feel like we're literally watching a disaster slowly unfold before our eyes. And quite frankly, there are far too many innocent bystanders. Sure, we're probably in this predicament because at least I think it's due in large part, to trash leadership, unethical leadership. I think there are plenty of examples of that we could go over to prove that point. But at the end of the day, divisive leadership does us no good. Feeding into people's fears does us no good. And my main goal today is to inspire folks who are kind of sitting in the middle right now, watching, or maybe you know someone who is somewhat deliberately unaware to what's going on. I want to talk to you, all of you, that are standing idly by watching this shit show unravel. I get it. I know that we all have our own lives, our own problems, and we're all kind of trying to survive the system that we're living in, trying to make the most of it, trying to do our best to be good people. But I need you to understand exactly how important your active involvement is in shaping our collective future. Do you have any idea how many conversations I have every week with people who are just like, yeah, but what are you going to do about it? And honestly, it's like, fuck, Frank, like succumbing to this shit show seems like a pretty piss poor option instead. So maybe first you could go register to vote. That'd be a nice place to start. Honestly, I've become so deeply invested in politics the last few years, and I had no intention. I never really planned or expected myself to care as much as I do. And I also didn't expect to feel like one of the few people that are actually paying attention to the disaster that's unfolding on both sides and refusing to be silent just because this is an area in which I don't have positional authority. And over the last few years, I've become more and more invested in how political leadership shapes cultural norms and how cultural norms shape acceptable corporate culture. Again, I think you've got to think systemically here. For the most part, I've focused my time mostly on trying to learn from, and of course, to influence the people around me to think more broadly beyond their individual needs and preferences, and to consider the perspectives, experiences, and policy impacts on people other than themselves. Which, by the way, this is a pretty healthy way to live. If you just stay in an echo chamber, if you only allow yourself to be exposed to the same or similar viewpoints as what you already think or believe to be true, what are you learning? And how are you growing and evolving and expanding as a person? I know most people would advise don't mix business and politics, but why? Because your viewpoint is shit and you know it? Here's why I'm willing to talk about it, because at the end of the day, here's my position. If we can't learn how to have healthy conversations and have a healthy level of respect for differing viewpoints, we are never going to build a new earth, because that requires a collective elevation of consciousness and active pursuit of increasing your own level of self-awareness, your own biases, leveraging your own strengths, and then being able to witness and hold space for those qualities in others. I believe in human-centered leadership. Leadership that intentionally reduces harm to the human spirit. And I may be optimistic and hopeful, but I do believe that there are more good, honest, just, and non-hateful, non-divisive people out there than there are of the alternative. And yeah, I'm also realistic, and I know a shift in culture isn't something that happens overnight, which is exactly why, as I said, I'm talking to the quiet folks in the middle that are just watching this dumpster fire burn because it hasn't gotten too close to you yet. I need you to realize that now is the time to get involved. And what I mean by that is, like, give a shit. Get invested in what's going on and demand better from our public figures and from anyone else in a leadership position. Demand better from yourself first, model the way, and then go demand better from those around you. I know we all have our own shit going on, but if you don't agree with the hateful and fear-based rhetoric being spewed, then it's time to loudly and proudly stand against it. And that can really be as simple as following and engaging with posts from activists and independent journalists that stand for the preservation of democracy and for the mutual love and respect of all human beings. Otherwise, what's the alternative? The other scenario, the other option you're choosing is willful ignorance, voluntary vision, tunnel vision. You're only seeing what you want to see, or it's possible that you're just not willing or not interested in exposing yourself to other opinions, to diverse perspectives. And in that case, I'd ask why. How else do you learn, grow, evolve? And in what ways does this demonstrate loving thy neighbor if you're not even willing to understand and respect your neighbor's way of life? If it's not harming you and it's not harming others, and you maintain parental autonomy, yes, I believe in limited government and bodily autonomy, from masks and vaccines all the way to elective abortions, because I know I can make decisions within my own value system without demanding everyone else around me also abide by those same values. So honestly, what's the problem with living and let live in the land of the free? Like, what world are we living in? And do any other millennial women feel completely gaslit, like our entire childhood was a lie? I mean, I know I have more trauma than this on top of it. Don't get me wrong. I know we've made progress as a society, but like, come on. I can't be the only one that's reading the tea leaves and feels that now is an imperative time for the silent majority, the people who believe in equality, common sense gun legislation, corporations and billionaires paying their fair share of taxes, climate and economic reform, freaking term limits for Congress. Like, you go to work every day and you treat people well, but your well-meaning intentions will mean absolutely nothing if you don't get actively involved in the election cycle this year, local and national. And equally important, consider the ways in which you're showing up in your daily life and how this either reinforces the existing narratives and leads you and those you have the responsibility and privilege of leading, personally or professionally, to feel fear and lack and uncertainty. Or do you emulate a message of mutual love and respect for your fellow human beings? Or do you contribute to creating a culture of empathy, understanding, and collective progress? People of marginalized identities are becoming less and less safe, less and less free in America. And I don't know about anyone else, but I'm pretty pissed about being misled or just completely deceived. So I'm not going to sit idly by for another election year and watch this nation and all of the wonderful people in it suffer in division and suffer in low vibrational consciousness because the silent majority isn't sure how to respond, what to do, or what to say right now. So they do nothing instead. There's that quote, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Another point I want to make, trauma-informed leadership. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the active unfolding of a genocide, the increase in anti-Jewish and anti-Muslim rhetoric and hate crimes since, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, next Benedict. The list, unfortunately, goes on and on and on. And this is exactly why I am so passionate about this style of leadership and calling leaders in to have this level of knowledge and awareness. Because how many folks have gone to work the past week or have been going to work for the past several months with all these heavy emotions while their direct team or their leadership team haven't said a word? And I get it. I know the counter argument is going to be something to the effect of, we can't respond to every incident. Why? Why? First of all, it doesn't have to be that complicated. In my experience with knowledge workers in corporate America, even in high volume virtual contact environments, something as simple as, hey, I know there's stuff floating around in the news this week. Let's just be aware of that. Know that we have some folks on our team who might be a little distracted, or this may be overwhelming for them. There's no need to give an immediate pass on work coming up or immediately move deadlines. This usually seems to be one of the main concerns from, my corporate bros. And no, that kind of thing can be worked out individually if and when it gets to that point, which you should know how to navigate without causing more harm. But that's probably a whole nother episode. But seriously, simply acknowledging that yet another fucked up situation occurred in the world we live in goes a long way to humanizing and holding space for people, for the human beings that work for you. And you'd be surprised at how effective taking 5 minutes during a team meeting to acknowledge reality outside of work, how effective that can be. Hey, I saw it too. This sucks. What can we do? Who needs support this week? Do we want to run this meeting for so-and-so instead of putting them on the spot? It's really simple. It seems so simple to me. So why is it so hard for others? And I know there are probably some HR folks right now Like, oh my God, no, don't single anyone out. Exactly. I agree with you. Don't. So when they ask, why are you asking? You can just say, because I'm checking in with everyone. Or, hey, I'm just making sure everyone's good. I'm figuring out who needs what this week. Better yet, you can just bring it up during your staff meeting. Hey, if anyone needs support or to discuss upcoming deliverables, let me know ASAP. Thanks. Again, very simple. Here's what I've learned from growing up in a household that forced me to keep what happened inside of those walls a secret from the world. And having an invisible disability has reinforced this fact. I've learned that people have no fucking idea who's going through what. No idea. So stop making assumptions and just check with your team and encourage them to check with their team, and so on and so forth. And like Reagan and I talked about last week, ingrain simply caring about people into your leadership style and your culture. Train people in capacity and resource management. Like, this has got to be what, perhaps aside from maybe financial acumen, this has got to be one of the most important hard skills in leadership, because you will burn people out. You will lose customers, clients, yourself. You'll overcommit if you don't figure out how to do this well. And most importantly, central to this entire message, to be trauma informed. Understand above all else how trauma affects people, the triggers, manifestations, common coping mechanisms, and then learn how to respond effectively, ensuring a positive impact rather than inflicting more harm. And understand, like I said, you have to be able to think systemically. Understand the repetitive, collective trauma that historically marginalized communities face on a daily basis. And then how the politics and overall socio-political landscape that you're choosing to ignore makes everyday life all the more taxing and all the more difficult, and how that affects their ability to show up, especially in environments lacking psychological safety and a sense of belonging. And this idea extends to neurodivergent and highly sensitive folks, and it really emphasizes the importance of creating inclusion, connection, and camaraderie in our work environment and our daily lives for everybody. So I guess getting back to my earlier point, maybe you've all watched me come to another way of thinking in real time. Maybe it doesn't even need to be political. No, I can't say that, because at this point, politics are literally harming people. And next is just the latest example. You can't push divisive and hateful rhetoric and be surprised when the people who look to you for guidance and inspiration on how to live their lives take actions like beating the shit out of someone in the restroom for splashing water on them. Most people I come across seem to agree. So I refuse to believe these people and their followers are the majority. I believe we live in a better world than that. I loved my graduate program. Obviously, I talk about it all the time, but I really did. It was a life-altering experience. It was exactly what I needed when I needed it, and it was so expansive for my worldview and for my personal development. But one of the quotes I read or heard, I'm like 99% sure this quote came from her, but one of my professors, Dr. Hoover, in her book, Countering Hate, she said something like, the only intolerance we should have is an intolerance for hate. In other words, hate is really the only thing we should all be standing against, which ironically aligns to the teachings of the God and Jesus I grew up learning about. But here I am in the heart of the South, scratching my head like, what? How did we end up here? And there's no way I'm part of a minority who thinks that we can do better. and that this isn't what our founding fathers intended. And it's definitely not the display of Christianity Jesus would be proud of. But whatever, that's just my opinion. So I guess if standing up and saying, hey, maybe don't vote against anti-LGBTQ plus legislation, maybe stop allowing your local officials to gerrymander without question, maybe you should worry about the choices you want to make as an individual rather than voting for politicians that force everyone to make the same choice as you. Again, in the land of the free. Maybe vote with the marginalized rather than against the marginalized. Maybe it's possible to make daily choices that align with your personal way of life and vote for people who stand for and protect the Constitution and the ideals of America, which I mean, even surface level, should be rooted in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all of us, not just the country club. And who are you to dictate what that looks like for others? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Stop dictating or trying to dictate the life of others. Stop trying to determine which type of bodily autonomy is legitimate or not based on your own personal opinions and beliefs. Instead, start leading with integrity, living your values out loud while allowing others to do the same. And above all else, maybe love thy neighbor as you love yourself. But maybe that's another one of the problems. Maybe you don't truly love yourself. Again, maybe that's a whole other episode. So in summary, leadership is a responsibility, and now is a time of great need. The world needs ethical, heart-centered leaders who are willing to step forward and make a positive difference. So as we each do our part to navigate our individual battles, let us not forget the importance and the duty we have to show up for one another. I ask you today to reflect on your role and responsibilities, not just within your family unit or your day job, but within society. And ask yourself, how can I contribute to nurturing a future that is defined by empathy, integrity, and inclusivity? And as always, remember, you have the power to break your own code and rewrite your story. And as you grow individually, your capacity to allow for our collective growth increases as well. Thank you for joining me today. I'll see you next time.